What is Dungeons & Dragons? Welcome to my channel. I focus on tabletop role-playing games, video games, and science fiction. Most people have played some game. When you play Monopoly, you roll the dice, then move your token. When you land on a property that you do not own, you have to make a decision. Do you buy the property or not? When you play a game of poker, you have to make a decision. Do you raise the bet, call the bet, or fold? When you play basketball, you have to make a decision. Do you pass the ball to another team member, or do you try and make the basket? Playing games are all about decisions. Many games like Monopoly and poker have elements of chance. Dungeons & Dragons has many elements of chance. Games like Monopoly and poker are called zero-sum games. That means if one person wins, another person loses. In the game of Monopoly, the game ends when one person owns everything. A game of poker can end that way, but normally the game ends before there's one winner. In the game of poker, however, some players walk away with more money than they started with, and some walk away with less. The total of all the losses equals the total of all the wins. That's why it's called a zero-sum game. Dungeons & Dragons is not a zero-sum game. You do not win at Dungeons & Dragons. At the start of a Monopoly game, everyone is given the same amount of play money. In Dungeons & Dragons, everyone is given the same chance to create a character. In Dungeons & Dragons, you roll up a character. This means you roll dice to create the statistics that describe your character. Dice introduce chance. Unlike Monopoly, players in Dungeons & Dragons start off with different advantages and disadvantages. This is similar to the game of poker. This is like a poker game where some players have the advantage of having more money than others to bet. The game of Monopoly comes with a set of pieces: the thimble, the shoe, the iron, hat, and so on. Dungeons & Dragons can be played with pieces, also known as miniatures. Some players buy miniatures and hand paint them to making them uniquely theirs. Other Dungeons & Dragons games use printed figures, markers, or even nothing at all. Games that do not use tokens or miniatures are called theater of the mind. In poker, the cards are dealt multiple times. Everything that happens from one deal to the next is usually called a hand. There are multiple hands in a game of poker. A session of Dungeons & Dragons is usually called an adventure. A set of adventures is usually called a campaign or module. Dungeons & Dragons is a social game. Zero-sum games like Monopoly and poker have the goal to win. In Dungeons & Dragons, the goal is to have fun. Dungeons & Dragons is a game where you use your imagination. In Monopoly, you don't picture yourself as your token. For example, if you use the iron token, you do not think of yourself as an iron. In Dungeons & Dragons, you do picture yourself as your character. If you are using a miniature, you want a miniature that matches the character that you want to play. Dungeons & Dragons uses a fantasy setting similar to The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Your character can be an elf, human, dwarf, or a variety of other fantasy creatures. Your character can take on the role of a fighter, a wizard, a healer, or a variety of other roles. You use your imagination to picture yourself in that character. Referees are important in sports. They make sure the games follow the rules. Dungeons & Dragons requires a referee. The referee in Dungeons & Dragons is called the Dungeon Master, or DM for short. In Monopoly, you rolled some dice, moved your token, then made a decision. In Dungeons & Dragons, the Dungeon Master describes the situation and you make a decision. For example, The dungeon master says you are standing in front of an old, weathered, and battered door. In spite of its age, the door appears to be sturdy. You hear someone mumbling behind the door. What do you do? Unlike Monopoly or poker, you can do many different things. For example, you could knock loudly on the door, or you could yell, "Open the door in the name of the king!" Or you could try and break the door down. Or you could just reach over and try and open the door. Or you could just say, "I turn around and go the other way." Those are just a few of the options you can do. You can use your imagination to come up with interesting ways to do things. What you do and how you do it is what makes Dungeons and Dragons fun. You could say your character gets out a piece of parchment and writes a note and slips it under the door. The note says, "I found a bag of money in front of this door. If it's yours, you can claim it at the tavern." Dungeons and Dragons is a shared adventure. You and your friends explore the world, fight monsters, and gain treasure. You win at Dungeons and Dragons if the journey is fun and exciting. The journey is the reward. Adventures can go from hilarity to somber in the roll of some dice. Your character can vanquish one foe only to be hurt by the next. The character you create in Dungeons and Dragons can die. The chances that your character can die adds excitement to the game. Some dungeon masters try to avoid killing characters. To me, this is cheating the players of real excitement. For example, in one adventure I ran, a character died. All the players were saddened by the loss. Then another player character realized that their character had a resurrection spell. One character resurrected the other character that died, and the adventure continued. The most memorable adventures are often punctuated by the deaths of characters. Or a player could merely recite a line from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, "I'm not dead yet!" Imagination and enthusiasm are the keys to having a great time playing Dungeons and Dragons. Thank you for watching my video. I look forward to learning what you think about this video. Let me know in the comments below. I appreciate all your comments. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give me a thumbs down. I appreciate both forms of feedback. If you're new here and would like to subscribe, you can click on the icon on the left. If you're interested, there's more content on the right.